This happened last year in summer, maybe in the beginning of June, and I was 17. I was on my way to get some camp leader training for volunteering abroad. I'm not very talkative with strangers. It takes some time for me to open up, and I thought I'd get out of my comfort zone and learn something new. I had at least 3 hours of traveling by buses and trains. Once I got to the capital, I traveled by train. It was so packed that I couldn't sit down anywhere but by the door on the steps. I sat down and plugged my headphones in. Then a man walked in and sat down uncomfortably close. I couldn't move anywhere. Out of nowhere, he starts talking to me. I pretend not to hear him while I look out the little window, but he taps my shoulder, and I'm really nervous and polite, so I take one of my headphones out, hoping he just wants to know where his stop is. So I hear out what he has to say. He asks me what I'm listening to. At this point, I can hear that he's kind of slurring his words, and his eyes are a little red and glossy. I don't think he had a face mask on either. I kind of nervously shrugged my shoulders and did an eye smile at him. He was trying to make small talk with me, but I wasn't really listening, just nodding, wondering how long I have to stay on the train. He consistently tried to get me to talk and answer to everything he said. His tone got a bit passive-aggressive a few times, so I was kind of scared not to answer. At one point, a man walked past us to use the toilet. I tried to give him a pleading look, but they greeted each other as if they were buddies. The man probably didn't have a ticket because he stayed in there the whole time I was on the train. After a while, he got back to my music and said that we should pick our favorite song and give them to each other to listen to them. I was creeped the heck out. So I did that. Then the chair hit the fan. He said, "Why don't you take your mask off? I bet you're pretty." I was shaking, and then he extended his hand towards me and tried to take my mask off. I literally put my hand in a cross gesture to protect myself and said no. I don't know what he was thinking, but I'm a nervous smiler, so I just chuckled very uncomfortably, and he tried multiple times after that. I kept doing the cross wrist gesture to protect myself and saying no each time. Then he asked me to guess his age. I did. He said he was 36. Then he asked me. I said I was 16, hoping that he would shut up, or at least tone it down, but nope. He got close and examined the sleeve on my shirt, saying it's nice. I was almost peeing myself at that point. Then the conductor walked towards us. Thank God. Or not. Cause when I look at him, almost tearing up, he ignored me and walked away. The dude playfully nudged me on the side of my thigh while still complimenting me and trying to get me to take my mask off. Then he gets up to get a cigarette and walks into the toilet to the second dude. He told me to let him know when I was getting off. Earlier, he told me that he was going somewhere further, and I convinced him I was going home and that my parents were waiting for me, cause I thought that would make him not follow me. He wasn't intimidated at all. Heck no. As soon as he got into the bathroom, I grabbed my bags, walked 2 wagons away from the one that we were in, and finally took a breath while people just looked at me weird. I must have looked like a mess. When the train arrived at my stop, I booked it and kept looking over my shoulder at the train station, as well as walking down the street. I decided to change it to my long hoodie in case he was somewhere behind me. Luckily, he didn't follow me. I called one of my parents on the way to my final destination, absolutely out of breath. My other parent called me later, assuring I was alright. I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't gone for that smoke, but I'm certainly glad he was stupid enough to hope that I would let him know when I was getting off. This was before COVID. I was walking to the train station after a long day of work, super tired and dragging my feet. There was a younger couple a few people in front of me. The guy was holding his girl's upper arm, like how a cop would drag or escort a perp kinda handhold. He was using some force cause the girl's shoulder was lifted obviously on the side he was holding. I don't know what to do, but we're going to the same station, so I tried to get closer. But they were walking pretty fast, and I was tired, so I couldn't catch up to hear what they were saying, or if they said anything. The weird thing is, the girl had a small nice bouquet of flowers in her purse, which she was holding with her other arm, so kinky was my first thought. Then the dude removed his hands. I was relieved. Then he moved his hand and started to push her. Like, she starts tumbling forward, and then this guy used his other arm to twist the girl's arm to her back while holding onto the back of her neck. Now this is just horrible. They started to draw people's attention now, and before I could catch up, they made a sharp turn and took the nearest exit. I had to go home, and I don't really know what I would have done if I would have caught up to them. Maybe this post would be better at the subreddit Off My Chest. I just don't know. This happened just a few days ago, and it still makes me very uncomfortable. So, to get to work, I have to go by train. It's the fastest and most comfortable way for me, since I don't have my driver's license yet. I was walking alongside the station and noticed two pretty intoxicated men sitting on a bench a few meters away from me. They were talking loudly and laughing, a seemingly normal interaction between two friends. As I get closer to them, I hear what they are talking about. At this point, I'd probably screw anyone, even her, one of the guys says. It might be good to add that me and those two guys were the only one at the station. I was sure I wasn't mistaken. He was referring to me, but I still thought I must be imagining things. I did pick up the pace to get past them faster onto the train, but before I got very far, I heard another comment from the guy. Look at her, acting like she didn't hear what I said. Now I knew I wasn't imagining things, and quickly pressed the train door button so I can get in. And that's when I noticed in my peripheral vision that they have stood up and were walking in my direction. I entered the train and tried to find a seat where there's people, but the train was empty. I pick up my phone and dial my mom, and as I wait for her to pick up, they walk by me, noticing the phone, and walk away. My mom picked up the phone soon after and talked with me until I got off at the next station. Thankfully, they didn't get off there as well. Maybe they were harmless, but whatever their intentions were, they still freaked me out. This is my first Reddit post. I never thought I would be posting something here. This all happened a few years back, around when I was in the 8th or 9th grade. So things are a bit blurry, but I'm trying to recall this as best I can. It was a sunny Monday afternoon. On Monday, I went to piano lessons directly after school, one train station away from the bus stop I used. So after my lesson was over, I was waiting for the train at the train station. I used to walk in circles or up and down while I'm waiting to pass the time. This time, I noticed a guy watching me, probably Arabic or Turkish. Definitely a foreigner. He couldn't speak German. Anyways, I noticed him and looked up. He smiled at me and waved. I brushed it off and thought nothing of it at first. The train came and I entered, sat down, and I did what I usually do when I got on the train. I was wearing headphones, but I see this guy again. He was in the same wagon as me, looking over, still smiling. One station later, I left the train and went to the bus stop, starting to feel uneasy. I noticed that the guy was following me and getting on the same bus as me. There are 3 different buses going from that stop, and mine is going to a rather quiet part of town. The bus wasn't overly full, and I was sitting in the front. I internally hoped that dude wouldn't get off the bus at the same stop as I did, but my hopes were quickly shattered because that's exactly what he did. I got off the bus as quickly as I could, crossed the street and looked back, slightly panicking when I saw this guy was still following me. I tried ignoring him and hid underneath my headphones when he caught up to me and started to speak to me. He asked me what I was listening to. I wondered why some random stranger would care what I was listening to, but I tried to be polite and handed him my headphone to listen. Feel Invincible by Skillet, in case anyone wants to know. Anyways, I took my headphone back after a few seconds, and the stranger started complimenting me, saying I was pretty, and all I could think was getting the heck away from there. So I asked him why he was following me and what he wanted. He was only able to speak English. The short convo went as follows. I'm sorry, but why are you following me? Do you need something? I don't know where the grocery store is. Could you tell me? It's between the train station and the primary school at such and such street. You actually should have seen it while you were on the bus. We went right past it. You need to take the bus back to the train station. I pointed to the direction on the opposite side of the bus stop. Thank you. Then this dude proceeded to hug me. Every single alarm bell went off in my head. I was literally frozen solid. But when he tried to kiss me, I pushed him away and told him I had to go home. Now with that, I ran. I looked back for a second and breathed out in relief when I saw him going back to the bus stop. But yet, I didn't stop running until I was home. I told my mom what happened, and from then on, she would pick me up at that train station. I hope this never happens again though. I close a lot of nights at work, so that means late nights at the train station. I remember this like it was yesterday, even though it happened about 2 years ago. I had a late close at work, so I missed the bus I usually take and had to walk home. Fine, I've walked home several times before, but there was this man who gave me a weird vibe. He was staring at me with that stare. Now, not sure how to describe in words. As I checked the schedule on the wall for another bus going in the direction, I realized that there was not another one for an hour. I wasn't about to sit around the train station where junkies like to hang out. Going back to the weird man, I tried to ignore him, but when I exited the station, I noticed he happened to go to the same door as me. I tried to brush it off, as maybe he had a car in the parking lot, or was waiting for someone in the pickup or drop-off lane. But I had a gut feeling that wasn't the case, because as soon as I stepped into the parking lot, he started to follow me. My brain and body started to panic, and I had to think on the fly what to do. I never had anyone follow me before, and I surely didn't want this guy knowing where I lived, even though my house was a half an hour walk from the station. Despite being on edge, I still kept walking, and once I got to the fire station, at the other side of the parking lot, I turned back. There was the man, still approaching me, and quickly. I feel it is important to point out that the man was very tall, so he crossed the parking lot in half the time it took me to cross. Now you're probably thinking, why not stop at the fire station and ask to wait for the guy to pass you? There wasn't anyone sitting at the desk in the window, like usual, and the place was darker than a bat cave, since it was 11:45 at night. Trying to ignore the man approaching, I crossed the street and make it past a dimly lit church and an empty elementary school. I walked at an above average pace, not looking back since the fire station. About 7 minutes passed for me to walk from the other end of the elementary school, where I had to wait for the walk light. My body wanted me to keep walking, but my brain made me do the unthinkable and turn to look back to see him walking towards me on the sidewalk. He was at the playground next to the school, and in a few long strides, he could have easily caught up to me. But at this point, my brain decided to take an alternate route home. In the back of my mind, I still was thinking it was simply a coincidence. But it was almost midnight on a Wednesday, and there was no way this man lives in the same direction I do, and would have happened to take the exact same route as to me getting home. Instead of crossing the street, I turned right and go up next to a duck pond by my house, even though I would still be climbing the same hill home. When I get to the next traffic light in a usually quiet suburb, I have an urge to look back again, and thought to myself, maybe he will just cross the street and not turn right. He was still there, almost like he was walking faster to catch up with me. I said I was panicked before, but now it's worse. I didn't even wait for the walk light and took off across the street. Sadly for me, the man also crossed the street. I went from speed walking to brisk jogging at this point. As I reached the end of the street, I turned left and continued to jog the edge of the duck pond on my route. When I got to the other side of the duck pond, I looked back, and the man was again about 30 feet away. I ran faster. I ran as fast as my little legs could carry me up the hill and didn't look back until I walked into my house, locked the door, and locked the front window. I was finally able to put my guard down and didn't see him follow me up the hill, and I don't think he found out where I lived. I slept under the blankets that night and never told anyone what happened. In short, let's never ever meet again. So I'm a 16-year-old girl who takes the train every day to and from school. I've had my fair share of weird encounters with strangers on the train, but there is one that stands out. I was on my way home from school, and I'm sitting on the train with my friends, like any other day. The stop I get off at is after my friend's stop, so I have to ride by myself for a couple of stops every day. On this day, after all my friends had gotten off, I was sitting alone. This man was walking through the aisle, looking for a seat, and as soon as he sees me, he says, "Oh, what a pretty young lady you are." It was clear that this dude was a junkie, and that he was on something as soon as I saw him. Now, I live in Finland, and if you take the train home every day, then it's not very rare to come across junkies. So anyways, this dude comes and sits right in front of me, and looks about 25 to 30 years old. He's wearing dirty clothes, his hair was long and greasy, and he was missing some teeth, and overall looks a bit rough. I've come across junkies on the train, and usually if you just mind your own business, they will not make any contact with you. But this man is just staring right at me, and I'm trying my best not to make eye contact with him, because I don't want him to talk to me. Despite not giving him any attention, he still goes on to compliment me, and ask me questions, like where I was going, or where I came from. I simply tell this man that I'm going home, and I keep looking out the window instead of looking at him. Then he goes and asks me out on a date, and suggests a coffee shop. I just say no and keep looking away. At this point there's still about 8 minutes left until my stop, and I think the man is going to stop talking to me because I already declined his offer of the date. But boy, I was wrong. The things he had said up to this point were pretty harmless, and I was not particularly uncomfortable yet. It was about 5 p.m., and there were other people on the train, so I didn't feel like I should move, because I was getting off soon anyways. Then after some silence, this man goes on to compliment my eyes, and asked me if he wasn't good enough for me, because he was a junkie, and I simply shook my head no. Then he says, "I've got a perfect idea for a date. Just me and you in a dark room, with some drugs, and a bed." His suggestion made me very uncomfortable, and I gave him a stern look. Then he asked me if I ever tried the drugs he mentioned, and I just ignore him. The next few things he says disgust me to this day. He says we could spend a week in bed together, and only get up to shower. And then he smirks at me and says, "We would have so much fun, but you would be so sore when I would be done with you." He was looking at me with the most disgusting grin, and I immediately understood what he meant. And I got up to walk away to the other side of the train. Thankfully, the train was just at my stop, so I got off and made sure he didn't get off as well. He didn't get off at my stop, but for the rest of my journey home, I felt grossed out. So to the junkie on the train, let's never meet again. This happened last night, and really freaked me out. I broke my foot a few weeks ago, and I am using crutches. Even though it takes a lot out of me, I still have to use public transportation most of the days, because I live in Tokyo, and cabs are too slow and expensive. So far this has just been an inconvenience, because Japan is pretty safe. Last night a guy approached me when I was coming downstairs at my local station, asking me if I was okay. I assured him that I was, and he started asking me questions. They were pretty innocent at first. Just like, "Where are you from? How did you break your foot?" I honestly didn't think much of it, because people here are fascinated with foreigners. But then it escalated to, "Where do you live? Let's get a drink." I told him that I didn't want to, because I don't drink, and I just wanted to go home and sleep. I had just finished work and I was tired. But he didn't want to take no for an answer, and he kept following me. Once we left the gate, he puts his arm on my shoulder and tries to physically move me in the direction of the restaurant, going, "See? It's just right there. Get a beer with me." This happened a few times, and I kept saying no, and he just followed me. At one point he tried to remove my glasses, saying, "You're so pretty." I probably should have smacked him with one of my crutches, or yelled at him at that point. But I was so freaked out that all I could think was, I couldn't let him follow me home. Fortunately, there's always a taxi waiting outside of the station, late at night for people that are too drunk to get home on their own. I made my way over to one, creepy guy at my side, with his arm around me. He was so close that one of my crutches got caught on his leg and I nearly fell. I waited till I was right next to the taxi before waving at the driver to get his attention. Creepy guy did not like that, demanding to know what I was doing, and I just shrugged. Taxi. And I got in. For a moment I was worried that he would try to get in after me, but he just stood there watching me drive off. From his reaction, I'm fairly certain that he did plan to follow me. I'm not sure how I feel. I'm glad nothing worse happened, but I felt so powerless and scared. A part of me still does. It was the first time anything like this had ever happened to me, and it's hard not to beat myself up for not doing more and for not standing up for myself. So dear creepy guy at the train station, let's not meet. This happened late last year. I used to take the train to and from college, and I would get off in not such a great part of town in order to take the bus home. Well, my fiance was picking me up, and he was late. I decided to wait and smoke a cigarette. The one guy walks up next to me and asks me for a cigarette, which wasn't too weird, until he said he never had one, and then he gave me $20 for a single cigarette. That was a little odd, especially since he was kind of forceful about giving me the money, and just kept offering me more and more. After that, he introduced himself, and would keep coming up with some excuse to hold my hand. I started to get quiet, because it was getting a bit weird. Then he started to get closer to me, touching my butt gently. I moved further away. This is the part that freaked me out the most. He offered me tons of money to come into his car. He just kept offering it, trying as hard as he could, before I finally told him that if he kept talking to me, I would scream. I've never been good in these types of scenarios, and I wish I would have taken down his license plate number, but I was frozen. So creepy train man, let's not meet again. This didn't happen directly to me, but was one of the things that freaked and still freaks me out the most. So this happened about 6 years ago, in my freshman year of college. I was an inexperienced 18-year-old male and came from a small town with virtually no crime. From the suburbs to the suburbs of a big city. I lived right near my university, in a neighborhood that wasn't very bad. Most students lived there, and I felt kind of safe. About 2 miles away, there's quite a dangerous neighborhood, filled with crime and drugs. I had even heard stories about students being kidnapped and held hostage while I was there. I'd gone to spend the weekend at my hometown, so I got on the bus, and it was about 7 p.m. Since it was around November, it was already getting dark out. I always took the train from the bus stop to the university station, and then took a 15-minute walk to my house through the campus, where I felt safe because campus security. Sometimes I would take the bus with 1 or 2 hometown friends that went to the same university as me, but this particular weekend I was alone. So I got on the train. I saw another freshman that was taking a class with me. I didn't know him very well, but we had talked a couple of times while in the class that we were taking together. I greeted him, and since he was focused on his phone, I didn't want to disturb him, so I sat a couple seats away from him. This next part is an important detail. This guy was carrying a rectangular shoulder computer case, which really screams, there's a computer in here. Since it was 7 p.m., there was still a decent amount of people on the train. However, university is a terminal station, so most of the students go there. When we were about 2 stations before, there were about 10 people spread all over the 5 or 6 carriages. This all happened very quickly. The doors opened, and no one left at that station. Suddenly, 2 huge black guys burst in and grabbed my class buddy. Another huge guy that was inside the train grabbed him too. When I say huge, I mean literally like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I'm not exaggerating. So the dude grabbed him and took him off the train with his phone and shoulder bag. They punched him once, took the bag, and were grabbing at him. Luckily, he managed to get his coat off and get back on the train just in time for the doors to close. Nobody in the train reacted because people were spread out, and it happened so very fast. My buddy was pale and very scared. I went to him and asked him if he was okay and comforted him. If not for a matter of seconds, those guys would have beaten him and sent him to the hospital. Both of us were scared to death. After that, I took him home and used my phone to call his roommates because they had taken away his phone and his keys. I was totally scared and freaked out too. This was the first time I witnessed a robbery and that kind of violence. It really changed the way I look at the train rides, and I never took one alone again. When I'm alone, I take the taxi home and don't take any chances. So huge guy that robbed my buddy, let's not meet. So this didn't happen to me recently. In fact, it was quite some time ago. I was around 9 or 10 years old. I was with my best friend and our parents. We were on our way to the nearest shopping town. We live in a rural-ish area with not many shops and would probably be finished looking around in about 10 minutes. So we traveled by train to our nearest large city. It was easier, probably cheaper, and definitely quicker. So when the train arrived, me and my friend quickly run on to secure a table seat. Those ones that have 4 seats with a table in the middle, pretty self-explanatory. The train was pretty empty, and with us being kids, we wanted our own table seat, and I decided to take one on opposite sides of the aisle, and that left our parents across from us. I noticed that guy a couple rows down in the normal seats. He was on his phone in a really strange position. It looked like he was taking photos of me. This was back in the day when selfies didn't really exist, so it was more than likely that he was either taking a photo of me or he was using his phone weirdly. Anyway, I pulled the collar of my coat over my face and looked the other way as I shrunk into my seat. I didn't mention anything because, to be honest, I thought I was being outrageous. A couple minutes later, a lady who I remember being tall, slim, and blonde with a wavy bob and glasses went over to my mom. She crouched down next to her and spoke very quietly. I really couldn't hear well enough to know what she was saying to my mom, but my mom's face told the whole story. My mom asked me to come sit with her and my friend's mom, and the lady went over to the conductor of the train. When we got to the next station, there were groups of police officers and security waiting on the platform. The train pulled up and the weird guy was taken off. We heard later that he did in fact take pictures of me, and they found hundreds of photos of other children on his phone and computer. They didn't go into detail, but I didn't ride the train for a very long time after. Worst thing is, I'm sure I saw him walking past my house a week later. So this week I headed up to London for a few days. I caught the train, and the journey takes a while, so I booked it to a table seat so I could get some work done. I put on my headphones and got out my laptop. At the start of the journey, I had all 4 seats to myself. The next stop, an older man, around 60, gets on with a massive bacon baguette. This will be important later. And he sits on the opposite side of me. The train is less than half full, with a lot of tables empty, but the old guy decided to sit opposite of me. Okay, but a little odd, but I didn't think much of it. A few minutes in, the guy starts trying to make conversation with me. I took off my headphones, and he says, "Will this offend you if I eat my bacon sandwich in front of you?" I was slightly confused, but then I realized that my laptop is covered in vegan stickers, one of which being my business. I respond with, "No, go ahead," and put my headphones back on. A few times he tries to talk to me, but I quickly shut it down, politely, as I'm wanting to get my work done. He was asking me where I was going, and who I was meeting, and this started to set off alarm bells. I told him a different location to where I was heading to, as I was getting bad vibes at this point. I get off the train and power walk to the tube, losing him, but I'm still looking over my shoulder, slightly freaked out by this, and take a slightly longer route to where I was going. I forgot about it by the end of the day. That evening I checked my phone and I had a friend request on Facebook and a few messages from what looks like that guy. I'm like, what the hell? How did he find me? And why is he adding me? I blocked and deleted him. I get home 2 days later and I start telling my husband about the creepy train guy, and he is also like, what the hell? The guy added him and tried to message him. So how did he find me? Like, I never gave him my name. My business is not leaked to my Facebook. And how could he have known which one was mine, as I had around 10 stickers on there?